Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
I live a quiet life, the kind where the biggest decision of the day is whether to use mahogany stain or walnut. My workshop is in my garage, a place filled with the smell of sawdust and varnish. I restore old furniture. It's a good business. I'm my own boss. I have a good handful of clients. I'm a craftsman. My hands are good at what they do. My work truck sits in the driveway. It's an old Ford F-250. I use it to pick up the beat-up pieces and drop off the finished ones. It's a part of my business. It's a part of me. The first notice came in a pristine white envelope. It was thick. The paper felt expensive. It had the HOA logo on it. I figured it was just some new rules. I get them all the time. I tossed it on the kitchen counter and forgot about it. A few hours later I remembered. I opened it. The letter said my truck was a blight on the community. It said it was too long for the driveway. The letter claimed it distorted the curb appeal. I read it twice. I went outside and looked at my truck. It fit in my driveway just fine. It was a standard size. It was clean. There was nothing wrong with it. I crumpled the letter in my hand. This felt like a personal attack. I went to Everett's house. He was the HOA president. He was retired, had a perfectly manicured lawn, and seemed to have a lot of free time. The kind of guy who watched what everyone else was doing. I knocked on his front door. He answered, his smile not reaching his eyes. He saw the crumpled envelope in my hand. His face hardened a little. "Desmond," he said. He used my name like he was a school principal. "What can I do for you?" "I got this notice," I said. My voice was calm, but I could feel my blood pressure rising. "About my truck. It's not too long. It's a standard truck. It's not a blight. It's what I use for my business." Everett crossed his arms. He looked at me like I was a problem. "We've had some complaints," he said. "People are concerned. It doesn't look professional. It makes the neighborhood look like a commercial zone." "It's a truck," I said. "Every other house has one. Mine is the same size. It's parked on my property. It's not hurting anyone. It's about the aesthetic," he said. He looked down his nose at me. "The HOA is responsible for protecting the property values. A big truck like that isn't helping. It's an antique restoration business," I explained. "It's quiet. I sand wood. I stain it. There's no noise, no traffic, no chemicals." I tried to sound reasonable. "It's a peaceful business." He ignored me. "The rules are clear," he said. "The notice is just a first step. You'll need to move it." "Where am I supposed to move it?" I asked. "It's my work truck. I need it. It's my livelihood." "That is not my concern," Everett said, his voice flat. "The notice stands. You have 1 week to comply." I stood there, staring at him. He didn't care about my business. He didn't care about the facts. He just wanted to flex his power. I turned and walked away. I couldn't argue with a person like that. I got back to my house. I was angry. I was frustrated. I was thinking of what to do next. My mailbox was a few feet from my front door. It had a little red flag on it. I hadn't noticed it before. I opened the mailbox. There was another envelope. This one was even thicker. It had the HOA logo again. I pulled it out. It was a formal fine. It wasn't for the truck. It was for something else entirely. The notice said I was in violation of the neighborhood's landscaping guidelines. A fine of $500 for unauthorized use of a tree for business purposes. I looked at the letter. I looked at the beautiful old oak tree in my front yard. I had hung a small sign on it. A simple wooden sign. It had my business name on it. Just a little sign, not bigger than a dinner plate. He had already gone to the next level. He was ready for a fight. I opened the front door to go inside and get my phone to call someone about this. The wind blew another fine into my yard. I looked at the paper on the ground. It was another HOA fine. It was for my tool shed. The notice said the color of my shed was too bright. It was a light blue color. It had been that color for years. My heart started to pound. Everett wasn't just being a jerk about the truck. He was looking for any reason to get to me. I knew then that this was not a simple disagreement about a truck. This was personal, and he wasn't going to stop. I had to find a way to fight back. The 2 fines felt like a slap in the face. One for a small sign on my tree. A fine of $500. The other for the color of my shed. Another $500 fine. It was ridiculous. He wasn't even trying to hide his dislike for me. This wasn't about rules. This was about him. I called the HOA office. The woman who answered the phone was polite but useless. She said the fines were issued by the board. She said I could appeal at the next meeting. The next meeting was in 2 nights. It was my only option. I knew I couldn't just pay them. That would be admitting I did something wrong. And I didn't. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I took pictures of my truck. I measured it. I measured my driveway. The truck was well within the lines. I went to the city website and printed out the regulations for home businesses. My business was allowed. It was a low-impact business. It was a one-man operation. I had all the paperwork ready. I even had the receipt for the paint I used on the shed years ago. It was a standard approved color. I was ready to present my case. I was ready to be reasonable. The meeting was held in the small community center room. It was stark and cold. A long table was at the front. Everett sat at the head. 3 other people were on the board with him. 2 men, 1 woman. They all looked just as serious as Everett. I saw a few of my neighbors in the audience. They looked curious, maybe a little nervous. When it was my turn, I went up to the front. Everett didn't even look at me. He just gestured for me to begin. I started talking. I laid out my evidence. I showed the pictures of my truck. I showed the measurements. It fits, I said. It's not a violation. Everett finally looked at me. He looked bored. He held up a hand. We have multiple complaints, Desmond. It's not just about the size. It's about the appearance. It looks like a work vehicle. It lowers the neighborhood's appeal. It is a work vehicle, I said. It's for my business, my home business. I have all the proper permits. I held up my papers. The city allows it. A board member, a man with thin hair, leaned forward. What about the noise, he asked, and the smell? We've had residents complaining about the constant sanding and the odor of chemicals. My mouth dropped open a little. There's no noise, I said. I work during the day. I use a sander, but it's not loud. And I use water-based finishes. They don't have a strong smell. That's a lie. Everett cleared his throat. Please refrain from personal attacks. These are complaints we have received. It's not about one person. It's about the well-being of the entire community. Another board member, the woman, looked at me. She seemed to hesitate. Then she looked down at her notepad. She didn't say anything. I felt myself getting angry. And what about the shed? I asked. And the sign? I've had that shed for years. The color is approved. The sign is tiny. It's a simple wooden sign. It doesn't violate anything. The sign is a business advertisement, Everett said. That is not allowed. And the shed has been a concern for a while. It's an eyesore. I looked at the neighbors in the audience. Some of them were looking at the ground. They knew it wasn't true. Everett turned to the board. I recommend we uphold these fines. We have a clear pattern of non-compliance and a disregard for community standards. I also propose we issue a formal cease and desist order for the business. This is not the type of activity this community was designed for. The board members voted. It was a quick show of hands, unanimous. The woman's hand went up too. I couldn't believe it. They didn't even discuss it. It was already decided. The fines were upheld. My business was shut down by the HOA. I walked out of that room. My papers were in my hand. They were useless. I had done everything right, and it didn't matter. I walked home in a daze. It was over. My business was gone. I was defeated. I got to my house. There was an envelope in my mailbox. A white envelope. I didn't think twice. I opened it. It wasn't a fine this time. It was the weekly neighborhood newsletter from the HOA. I opened it. There was a section titled Community Watch. My name was in bold letters. It claimed I was a community nuisance. It mentioned the illegal commercial activity I was performing. And then it got worse. The letter claimed a neighbor had reported suspicious persons visiting my house late at night. It said the behavior was criminal in nature, and that the HOA had formally reported me to the authorities. It was all a complete lie. The lie was printed for everyone to see. I read the words again. Suspicious persons, criminal in nature. The newsletter was a complete fabrication. A lie. Everett had taken a disagreement about my truck and turned it into a public smear campaign. I looked out my front window. A neighbor I'd always waved to was walking his dog. He saw me and looked away quickly. My stomach churned. The newsletter had already done its damage. Then the police cruiser pulled up. It stopped right in front of my house. 2 officers got out. My heart started to pound. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real. An officer walked up to my door. He was tall. He had a notepad in his hand. "Good afternoon, sir," he said. His voice was calm. "We're here to follow up on a report." "A report?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he was talking about. "A complaint was filed," he said, "regarding suspicious activity at this address. The report mentions possible illegal activity. Could we take a look around?" I stepped aside. My hands were shaking. I led them to my garage. I showed them my workshop, the antique chairs, the tables in various stages of repair, the smell of wood and dust. "This is my business," I said. "I restore furniture. That's it. Nothing illegal. No suspicious people. Just clients who drop off and pick up furniture." The officers looked around. They looked at the tools on my workbench. One of them picked up a small brush. He looked at a half-finished cabinet. "The report mentioned people coming and going late at night," the other officer said. "That's not true," I said. "My clients are here during the day, regular business hours. I don't work at night. I don't have anyone here after dark." They asked me to explain the business. I did. I explained where I got the furniture. I explained how I got my clients. They looked at the paperwork on my desk. They were professional. But the fact that they were here at all was a stain on my life. They were here because of Everett. After about 20 minutes they had seen enough. The tall officer looked at me. "Everything looks to be in order here," he said. "We apologize for the inconvenience. We'll file our report. The complaint appears to be unfounded." I watched them get back in their car and drive away. My neighbors were still outside. They had seen the police car. They had seen the police go into my house. The lie had become a kind of truth in their minds. It didn't matter what the police found. Everett had made me a suspect. I went back inside. I was filled with a cold rage. I was not going to let this happen. I was not going to let Everett get away with this. He had taken my business, my reputation, and my peace of mind. Now I was going to take something from him. I went to my computer. I started with a Google search. I looked up his full name. I looked for his business history. He was a retired accountant. I went to the city records. I looked up his property. There was a lot of information there, nothing that would help, but I kept digging. I was going to find something. I remembered something. A conversation I had with another neighbor a few months back. A woman named Grace. She had an issue with the HOA. They tried to fine her for her front yard fountain. She had mentioned something about Everett, about him always being on his computer, about him having a lot of money but not a lot of friends. She said he was a quiet man with a lot of secrets. I decided to go talk to her. I found Grace working in her garden. She looked a little surprised to see me. I told her what had happened. I told her about the police. Her face went pale. She leaned in close. She looked around like she was afraid Everett was watching. "He did the same thing to my friend down the street," she whispered. "He started fining her for everything after she refused to sell her house to his brother. He has a lot of connections. He's always trying to get his hands on more property." "Do you know anything else?" I asked. "Anything at all that could help me?" She thought for a minute. "He sends out those letters," she said. "The HOA newsletter. I think he does it himself. He has a bunch of envelopes. They're addressed to everyone on the street." She paused. "His printer is always going. He's printing all sorts of stuff, letters, flyers. I saw him throw away a pile of them one time." I thanked her and went back to my house. I thought about the envelopes, the printer. I went to the city website again. I looked up property records for Everett's address. There was a business name listed there. It was a holding company, nothing unusual. But I found a mailing address for the company. It wasn't his house. It was a P.O. box in a different city. My mind started to race. Why would a company with a home address have a separate P.O. box for its business? Typed the P.O. box number into the search bar. The search results were a mess. But then I saw something. A forum post. It was an anonymous post on a neighborhood site from a city miles away. The post mentioned a holding company with the same name as Everett's. It talked about a legal battle with a homeowners association. I clicked the link. The old news article was about a major scandal involving a private company and property acquisitions. The company had been using a shell company to buy properties and force out the owners. The article mentioned the CEO of the company. It was a man with Everett's last name. The article had a photo of him. It was a younger Everett with a younger face, but it was him. And the address listed for the company was a property that was being investigated for illegal activities. I looked up the address. It was in a completely different state. The police had been called to the place many times. I kept reading. I was holding something that could change everything. I couldn't believe it. I scrolled through the article again and again. The photo, the name, the company, it was all there. Everett wasn't just some cranky old guy with a power trip. He was a professional at this. He had a history of using harassment and legal threats to get what he wanted. He used shell companies to buy up properties. It was his whole life's work. A sudden dread seized me. He wasn't targeting me because of my truck or my shed. He was doing this to break me, to get me to sell. He had probably done this to other people in the neighborhood. It all made a sick kind of sense. I made a copy of the news article. I saved every piece of information I could find. My mind was racing. I could go to the police. I could go to the HOA board, but I wanted to see his face. I wanted to see him break. I wanted to confront him with what I knew. I walked over to his house. The manicured lawn was green and perfect. The curtains were perfectly straight in his windows, nothing looked out of place. It was a mask. I knocked on his door. He opened it. He had a look of annoyance on his face. "Desmond," he said. He didn't even try to hide his disdain. "I thought we were finished." "We are," I said. "But I wanted to give you a chance to explain yourself," he laughed. It was a hollow sound. "Explain what? The HOA fines? The newsletter?" He tried to look smug. "We've been very clear on this. You're out of compliance." "Not about that," I said. "I know who you are, Everett." The smile fell from his face. "I'm Everett, the HOA president. What are you talking about?" I took my phone out of my pocket and held it up. I had the news article open. "This company," I said. "This scandal. It was you, wasn't it? Forcing people to sell their homes, using shell corporations. You were the CEO." His face went white. The color drained from it. He stared at the screen. He tried to grab my phone, but I pulled it back. "Where did you get that?" he asked. His voice was no longer smug. It was a whisper. "That's old news." "Old news doesn't mean it didn't happen," I said. "You're doing the same thing here, aren't you? Targeting people you want to run out. You tried to fine a woman for her fountain. You lied to the police about me. This is what you do. This is who you are." He looked around nervously. "You don't understand," he said. "That was business. It was all legal. Everything was legal." He got angry. "You have no proof. It was years ago. Nobody cares about that." "I care," I said. "And I think my neighbors will care. The police will care. The news will care." He scoffed. "You're a small-time furniture restorer. You think you can mess with me?" He stood up taller. The arrogance was back, but now it was a shield for his fear. "I have connections, lawyers, people in high places. You try to ruin me, and I will make your life a living nightmare." "You've already started," I said. "You've already tried to ruin me." He got closer. His voice was low and menacing. "I'll bury you in legal fees you can't even dream of. I'll make sure you can never own a home again. I'll make you wish you had just paid the fines." I wasn't afraid. I was angry. I was more determined than ever. "You've made a mistake, Everett," I said. "You messed with the wrong person." I turned to walk away. I was going to the police. I had what I needed to take him down. As I walked down his perfect driveway, a black car pulled up. It was a brand new Mercedes. A man in a suit got out of the passenger side. He was tall, with a stern face and slicked back hair. He looked past me at Everett, who was standing at his front door. The man's eyes went from me to Everett and back again. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me with a cold stare. Everett looked at the man and gave a little nod. The man's expression didn't change. He just stared at me. I kept walking, but I knew. This wasn't just Everett. This was a whole network of people. He had already called for backup. The game had just changed. I was in deeper trouble than I had ever imagined. The man in the suit just stood there. He watched me with cold eyes. Everett looked at him with a kind of desperate hope. I knew then that this was not a fight I could win in a courtroom. I had no money for lawyers. Everett and his friends had all the power. I went back to my house. I was beaten. But then I looked at the files I had found on my computer, the articles, the names, the details of the scandal. I had something they couldn't take away from me. I had the truth. I wasn't going to fight them with lawyers. I was going to fight them with my neighbors. I spent the whole night on my computer. I printed out everything I had found on Everett, the articles, the names of his shell companies, the history of him using the HOA as a tool for his business. I made flyers. I wrote a letter. It was called The Truth About Our HOA. I made copies. A lot of copies. I went out the next morning at dawn. I walked up and down every street. I put the flyers in every mailbox. I slid them under doors. I put them on windshields. I knew Everett's lawyer would probably send me a nasty letter, but it wouldn't matter. The truth was out there now. By the afternoon, the neighborhood was in an uproar. People were outside talking in groups. I could hear them yelling. My phone started to buzz. My neighbors were calling. They had read the flyers. They were shocked. They were angry. They had seen the police car at my house. They had read Everett's newsletter. Now they were reading my flyers. The lies were exposed. The HOA was in chaos. An emergency meeting was called for that evening. The community center was packed. There were more people there than I had ever seen before. Everyone was yelling. Everett was standing at the front next to the man in the suit. The lawyer was a big guy. He looked angry. Everett looked scared. I walked to the front of the room. The people made a path for me. I held up my stack of papers. "This is a copy of what I found," I said. "This is the truth about our HOA president." The lawyer stepped forward. "This is slander," he said. His voice was loud and firm. "We will sue anyone who spreads these false claims." A woman in the crowd yelled, "Are the police reports false too? The ones you filed on Desmond?" Someone else said, "Is the cease and desist order for his business legal? Is it true you did this to other people in the past?" The meeting was a mess. Everett tried to speak but nobody would listen. He looked at his lawyer for help but the man just stood there. A board member, the woman named Maria, stood up. She looked nervous but determined. "I knew it was wrong," she said. "I knew what he was doing was wrong. He told me it was just for the good of the neighborhood, but he was just trying to get what he wanted. He lied to us all." The crowd turned on Everett. They screamed at him. They demanded he resign. The board members looked at each other. They didn't say a word. They just voted. A simple show of hands. They voted to dissolve the board. The HOA was gone. Everett's power was over. He had lost everything. The lawyer put a hand on Everett's arm and led him away. They didn't even look back. I walked home alone. The victory felt hollow. My business was still gone. My reputation was still in shambles. The community was in chaos. I had won the fight, but I had lost so much. I went into my garage. The lights were off. It was cold. I sat down in an old chair I was supposed to be restoring. The chair was broken. The wood was chipped. It was just an empty shell. I had won. But what I had won was nothing. I sat there in the dark with nothing but the silence of my victory.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.